Hey guys, Zach here, and today I want to share with you guys a couple of mistakes that I've made in the past that are easily repeatable, but they are also super easy to avoid. Just quickly before we do start, if you guys could consider subscribing, it does greatly help out the channel. And with that out of the way, let's get started. The first mistake I made was getting an aquarium without doing any background research at all, right? I watched a couple videos and saw, hey, these are really neat looking aquariums. Let me try that, without fully understanding what I was getting into. Now, for background research, what I would recommend is just getting a good general knowledge of the aquariums and maintenance and everything like that. I'm not saying go super specific. You don't need to know every kind of fish and every kind of plant. But what I am saying is maybe you start to learn about the differences between different kinds of plants, right? The difference between floating plants, between stem plants, between epiphytes and mosses. Learning the difference so that you can care for them, and so that when you do go to the store, okay, I know how to take care of that plant. Yeah, it looks neat. Yeah, I'll take it home with me, and you have a better chance of success. As for something like fish, right, just having a good basic understanding of care for fish, maybe diet, maybe some water temps, tank size. Not specific fish, but having a good understanding of that. But if you do know specifically what you want to go for, so let's say you want to go for guppies specifically, right? Diet, tank size, the sociability, are they going to get along? Do I need to get a pair or do I need to get a group of them? Things like that that can increase the quality of life for something like a fish. And doing background research is also going to make your life a lot easier because you're going to know what to expect. The other thing that doing a little bit of background research allows you to do is set expectations for your tank, right? You do a little bit of background information, you learn, something about some stems, something about some of the plants, and now you can kind of work up and you know what's going to happen or should be expected to happen as your tank grows, right? You've got stem plants, okay, I've done my background research, I know I can trim them, so once they hit the surface I can trim them, and now I've got lots of new stem plants. Instead of just letting it grow and being like, holy crap, what do I do with these plants that are outgrowing the tank? It also allows you to expect other things, maybe slight issues that can arise in the tank as it is developing. Let's say you have a piece of wood and it leaks tannins. You've done your research and you knew this, and now you're nice and calm and cool in this situation, and you know, okay, it's just basically a visual effect on the tank that's made it darker. It's not going to affect the plant health at all, but you know what? I don't like it darker. I'm just going to do a quick water change and that'll solve it. And you understand that it can come back later as the wood leaches more tannins. Someone who doesn't do research wakes up one morning, sees their tank is completely like that brown color, and they're freaking out. They're frantically searching online. They don't know what to expect. Something's gone wrong with the tank. You don't want to be that person, right? So do a little bit of background research and it'll greatly help you as your aquarium grows. The second mistake I made was just rushing through every step of making an aquarium. So rushing through the substrate layer, rushing through the hardscaping, rushing through the planting, rushing through even the cycling process. So let me break this down for you. I get my tank and I throw my layer of aqua soil in the bottom, good enough, throw in some rocks, throw in some wood. I'm like, wow, this looks great. Make it a little wet, pour some water in. Okay, there's a little bit of water, so I'll throw in all my plants and I'll fill it up. Well, there's a couple things that happen when you just rush through. The first happened in the substrate layer. I threw my substrate in thinking it's good enough. Well, as I go and plant, the plants are staying just fine, but when I fill it up, it starts to float. So let's say you've got hair grass in the front. Everything comes up, and I'm like, oh no. I try and plunge it back down. The substrate isn't deep enough to get a good grip on the hair grass, and the hair grass doesn't have the roots established yet to keep itself down, so it just keeps floating back up. Okay, now I have to backtrack and put a little bit more aqua soil in to make sure that I've got a deep enough substrate layer, right? You don't want to have to do that. Same thing happened with the hardscape. I threw in rocks, I threw in wood, and I filled it up. Well, guess what? Wood floats when it's not been submerged for long, and I didn't glue it because I just rushed through. I was like, that's good enough, right? So my wood's floating. Okay, I've got to drain it and glue it, and then it's back to good, right? Well, I also rushed through the planting process. Plants are floating up, and the other thing is I didn't place them optimally, right? I had designed a hardscape, didn't think of planting, and now I've got them all jammed in one area and I can't fit them in this area, and you know what, the Java Fern's kind of blocking this, or the Anubias is blocking that, and there's only so much space, right? Now I have to go back and kind of reorient and fix everything that I've done along the way, right? And then I rush through the cycling process. Well, that's really not good, because either you're doing water changes every day or you're ending up with a bunch of dead fish, right? So be careful, take your time, make sure you're doing quality steps all the way, and you shouldn't have any problems. Third mistake I've made is not ensuring there are ample nutrients for my plants. So what I mean by this is just making sure that your substrate is getting nutrients into it so that the plants are getting nutrients. Now, this is quite hard to do, and if you go out and you get a new bag of aqua soil, you're perfectly fine. You're going to have so much nutrients in it, you're probably not going to have to worry about it. And if you run a tank and you set it up all proper, you're probably not going to have to worry about this. But for me, what I did was I set up my tank. I've got aqua soil in the bottom, I've got plants, and now I let the tank just run, and I run it for like a year-ish, I think it was. And I've got these massive amount of plant growth. I'm super happy, super stoked, and I've got like, I think 10 neons in there, so not a whole bunch of bioload. I'm super excited. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. I didn't know that the plants were slowly seeping out the nutrients, so I go and I decide to do a rescape on the tank just to change things up. And because I had changed the way I scaped it, I used a little bit less hardscape, and oh, look at that, I've got room for new plants. So I go to the store, I get a couple new plants to try out, and like a week later, the plants aren't looking the best. I'm like, what's happening? I haven't had any issues up to now. Is it just the, redoing the tank that made it kind of iffy? But then I looked into it and I'm like, okay, it means there's not enough nutrients. So I kind of panicked, I went out, I got some root tabs and I just plunged them in, and that solved it for the time being. However, this mistake is super easy to avoid. Now, the way to avoid this mistake is just making sure you have a moderate amount of waste being produced in your tank that is being broken down in your substrate layer. Now, what do I mean by that? I just mean make sure you've got a bunch of fish and maybe some shrimps and some snails, right? That tank had just 10 neons, and I don't know if you've seen neons, they're quite small. So for the amount of plant that I had to the amount of fish, over that extended period of time, and then slightly increasing the load made it just barely tip over the scale, and it wasn't good. Another way to avoid this is just by mixing new aqua soil with old aqua soil, right? If you've got a bag of aqua soil and say you've got it in a tank, but you still have like half the bag left over and you're gonna run this tank for a little while, what I would do is anytime you rescape it, take out like half the old, put in some of the new, and you're going to be perfectly fine. As I said before, what I solved the issue with was root tabs. You can do this too, and it's a great way to add a little bit of nutrient back into the substrate. Another way that some of you might not like is when fish do die, just letting them decompose on the bottom. If you're not big on that, you can also just bury the fish in the substrate, and all those nutrients are going to break down as long as your tank is balanced. They'll break down and disperse through the substrate and really give your plants some juice, and they'll grow nice and big. So mistake number 3 to avoid is letting your substrate deplete. Mistake number 4 is a super common mistake. It's super easy to make, and that is just poor management of lighting. Right? I've had tanks before where I've given too much light, and I've had tanks before where I've given too little light. Let's explore this. So I give a tank too much light. I start up a tank and I give it 10, 12 hours of light every single day. Well, issues are going to start arising, right? You're probably, most likely, going to get algae start to grow in your tank. And if it's a fresh tank with plants that haven't completely grown in yet, the algae is probably going to outcompete the plants. And it'll slowly take over the tank, and you constantly have to try and remove it. And it's just, nothing's really going to work, and the algae is always going to come back if you give your tank too much light. Now, if you let your tank grow in and slowly increase the lighting, then you can avoid this issue, right? What I normally do is I normally start a tank on like 8 hours of light, and then once it grows in a little bit more and I see that, there's no algae taking over, maybe I'll bump it up to like 10, and so on from there, right? You want to scale your amount of light with the amount of plant mass in your tank. right? But on the other end of the spectrum, you can give your tank too little light. I'm all for a nice low-tech scape, right? I have scapes that I don't put lights on them, but I understand that there are certain needs that the plants have and a certain requirement of light that is needed. If you're not going to give your tank a lot of light, say you're just going to use the window to light your tank, then I would recommend very highly to look at plants that might require a little bit less light so that you're not creating issues in the tank, right? If you don't want to have lots of lighting on a tank, then I wouldn't recommend something like a red stem plant, because guess what? It's either going to turn green and not look its best, or it's just going to die, right? If you want to go with a nice low lighting tank, I would recommend things like Anubias and Crypts, which thrive in low lighting and still grow and look wonderful. Another thing to mention with light management is just timing it, right? A lot of lights now do come with built-in timers. If they don't, then go and buy one. That was the biggest thing for me. Poor management of the actual lighting period, and it led to some inconsistencies in my tank. I thought that, yep, if I turn my light on and off, I'll remember to do it at certain times every day. Well, turns out I'm somewhat forgetful, and maybe I forget to turn on the light, or I leave the light on for too long, and then issues do start to develop. So mistake number 4 is just proper light management. Mistake number 5 is one that I've done one too many times, and it is creating scapes that I don't enjoy, right? You get all excited, you've got your substrate layer in and out, you gotta make the hardscape. That's really like the heart of the aquarium, and you put everything in, you're really happy with it, and then you kind of take a second look at it and you're thinking, you know what, it's okay, I don't really love it. And then you're just like, whatever, I'll just move ahead with everything. So you glue everything, and then you plant it, and then you fill it up. And then you know what, you come back the next day and you look at it and you go, yeah, I just don't like it. And now the tank's just really gonna sit there. And there's a big difference in what happens to a tank that you kind of think is meh, and a tank that you really enjoy. If you create a tank and you really love the scape, you're most likely going to want to see the tank prosper. So you're going to be on top of any maintenance that needs to happen. You're going to be on top of, say, trimming plants. You're going to want to see the fish thrive in that aquarium, right? You're going to want to see all of this happen in the aquarium because you really love the scape and you just love the aquarium. But if you've got a scape that's kind of like, meh, you know what, it's okay, now it's just kind of an aquarium, chances are you're going to let your maintenance slip. You probably won't trim the plants. You're not really going to care to put fish in it, and it's just kind of going to waste away until you decide to redo the scape, right? Now, a simple solution to kind of always make sure that you've got scapes that you enjoy is to do everything dry. So put in your substrate and then create your scape with your wooden rocks, and then just leave it overnight. This is something that I have done for the past couple of years now, and it has really helped me when I am sitting on the fence about escape, right? What it allows you to do is just come back at it with a fresh set of eyes and be like, you know what, just the way that this wood is with this rock, I don't really like it, and then let's change some stuff over here. And you can make those small adjustments after with a fresh set of eyes that, you know what, yesterday maybe you were just gonna fill it up and call it a day, but today, you know what, you've got that second look at it and you see that there are a couple of things that aren't perfect with it, or things that are just slightly bugging you, and you can fix those and create a scape that you really, really love. So mistake number 5 is creating scapes that you don't enjoy. So that is everything for this video. Hopefully you guys have found this helpful, and hopefully it'll help you avoid some of the mistakes that I have made. If you have enjoyed, please consider subscribing, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.